Hey, folks, we're a little bit early, but that's how we roll. Welcome to the BAMF podcast. We're here today to talk about the new Captain America trailer. Before we do that, let me play our contractually obligated musical intro. And that, ladies and gentlemen, assures you that you're listening to a quality podcast. High production value operation around here. Ethically sourced, domestically produced, farm to table, geeky conversation for your podcast listening pleasure.
Gluten free.
Gluten free. No additives, no preservatives.
Artisanal.
Bespoke.
What other words can we throw in there?
Bespoke.
Bespoke. That's good. Yes.
Yeah. With new picante flavor.
In a couple months, we'll add pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice. The seals will once again be broken. The prophecy will be fulfilled. And you're hearing the dulcet tones of Mr. Owen Casey Stevens, who is joining us to talk about Captain America today. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be seen.
I understand that sentiment. I'm going to throw the link in the trailer in the chat for the trailer from the IGDN YouTube page. If anyone wants to check it out, it's super easy to find. It's 2 minutes of Anthony Mackie being Captain America, Giancarlo Esposito being a brooding bad guy with guns, and Harrison Ford being, is he president?
He is taking over the role of Thaddeus Ross from William Hurt, who unfortunately passed. It's one of the reasons why they make a comment in the trailer of "I like the new look," and he said, and then Harrison Ford goes to say, "I had to shave the mustache, or I would lose the election."
Okay, but does that mean is General Ross the president?
That does mean that General Ross is currently the president? Yes.
Okay, so he's
Harrison Ford has been president in movies before, so that part, that is probably the most believable part of this Marvel movie. Not that I want Marvel movies to be believable. I go to Marvel movies for a suspension of belief, but I may have a harder time picturing Harrison Ford as existing in this superhero world that I'm going to have picturing him as president.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. All right, so we don't get him a lot of plot. It's got kind of a political thriller tone without really giving away any kind of plot details in the trailer, other than Harrison Ford is Ross, and now he's president, and there's a funeral. We don't know who it is. And the guy who used to run Pollo Hermanos on Breaking Bad is some kind of international terrorist. And that's what, at the end.
Yeah.
They saved it for the very end. There's a Red Hulk who looks a bit like Harrison Ford, and he slams the shield into the ground. Hey, Lewis Porter Jr. has joined us. It's a great trailer. No Serpent Society members, though. Good to see you, Lewis.
Lewis Porter Jr. You have spoken way too soon on that.
What? There were Serpent Society in here?
Because I tend to focus on my stuff on Superpowered Legends, and I try to tie in a Superpowered Legends release with the most recent Marvel release.
Of course.
It's one of the things I do. I tend to look at the cast lists and look at what characters are in there. And this is all this we've already said we were going to be doing some spoilers in this regarding the trailer and stuff. One of the cast members is listed as Rachel Layton, who if for comic book readers, that is Diamondback.
Oh, I a trivia that Jacob knew. Ooh.
Of course, Diamondback has a pretty deep history in the Captain America franchise, even if it was largely connected to Steve Rogers. But given how they have done things, Diamondback may or may not be Diamondback or part of the Serpent Society at this point. One of the things that the Marvel movies do really well is sprinkle stuff throughout that they can pick up later or not. Like one of the most brilliant moments when they were introduced, and spoilers for all the Marvel movies, by the way. If you haven't seen a Marvel movie at this point, we may spoil it. In the movie when they introduced Mysterio, is that Mysterio was backed by background characters from a bunch of different movies. A bunch of people who that character and that actor were brought forward as this is part of the team, the B-list, whatever, people that have not gotten their moment in the sun, who have all gotten together to help Mysterio be Mysterio, which very much differs from how Mysterio operates in the comics, but makes a lot of sense within the context of Marvel movies. So is she going to be Diamondback? Is there going to be Serpent Sorority? Are they just introducing Serpent Sorority? That's actually not terrible. I misspoke.
Considering the women often go off and have their own adventures,
Serpent Sorority is not the worst thing I've ever said. Or they may just be introducing her. For all we know, she's going to have 1 minute of screen time, but they will have introduced the character, so that character is there if they want to do something with her later. So we don't know. But she actually, dated Steve Rogers for a while. Dated might be too strong a word, but they were definitely spending time together outside of punching things. So,
well, I mean, in a way, she was kind of the parallel to Catwoman, to Batman.
Yeah, she was the redeemable villain.
Yeah. The thing is that Catwoman and Batman, classically, Catwoman is still committing crimes while dating Batman, which makes the whole thing a whole lot iffier. Whereas Diamondback went, you know what? I don't want to be a bad person anymore. And that change of heart is what caused her and Captain America to have something in common. And of course, Steve Rogers doesn't brood as much as Bruce Wayne does.
Yeah, that is certainly the truth.
So, speaking of broody Captain Americas, I mean, that's kind of part of the character. And you got Anthony Mackie. You have a black Captain America during a time in our history where things are very racially sensitive, racially fraught.
I don't think there has been a time in our history where things were not racially fraught. Not in America. Our country was racially fraught before we were this country.
Yep.
This is a good point. I guess what I'm trying to say is during the Falcon and Winter Soldier series on Disney Plus, they didn't really address that head on. And they gave Anthony Mackie, he had a Captain America speech at the end, but they didn't really, go there.
I disagree, right? Because when they were dealing with the black super soldier that he was talking to, he went into that a fair amount in depth. And one of the quotes that they frequently use when you were looking at trailers for that show is, the history of this shield is complicated. So I don't know that they resolved it, but I really do think they head on approached the question of what is it like to be a black man and be in the Captain America costume with Captain America's shield. And we know from this trailer that one of the things that's going to happen is that Thunderbolt Ross is going to say, I want to go back to making Captain America an official position within the military forces. And Mackie's character responds, and if we disagree on how to handle a situation, so it would not surprise me if we don't see that addressed further. I don't think it's something that should be resolved in a single series or a single movie, right? That is, in fact, a complicated issue. And I feel that Mackie has a great awareness, and that the writing team has at least some awareness of how complicated this is and how you can't just give it a pat answer and for it to feel authentic.
Yeah. And Lewis says, LeVar Burton commented on that very concept in the scene from Clipped.
Yes.
So I'll check that out. In fairness, the comics haven't done much more than just kind of raise it. I know one of the Mark Waid Avenger comics, there was a scene where they're fighting, smash cold open, they're fighting on a bridge, they defeat the bad guys, and then two Girl Scout troops run up to Sam and hey, Captain America, you buy some cookies from us? And there's one troop that's mainly black girls, one troop that's mainly white girls, and then the cameras show up, and it's kind of making light of it, but they don't really. I mean, I don't know. It's I love Captain America as a character. I just always feel like, even when we're not talking about race and just any other issues, it kind of seems like he gives it a monologue, but you don't really dig in. Except, whenever there's a Republican president and he decides to stop being Captain America and go find himself on a motorcycle, driving across the country, which happens, every decade or so.
Yeah, I still have the Captain America No More comic buried somewhere here, and that predates this significantly. But I don't know if it is even necessarily appropriate for comic books and comic book movies to do more than raise the question. I think it's important that they raise the question.
Yes.
But I also feel like this is an area where, as a heterosexual, cisgender, wasp, white guy, maybe my opinion doesn't really matter on that issue, right? I like Mackey's a great character. I am very happy that we got to give him the time to breathe, to make the transition from just being a Falcon to being Captain America with wings in the Disney series. And I can tell already I'm going to enjoy this movie at least as much as I, on average, enjoy Marvel movies, which is usually quite high. I actually am a good deal more hopeful for it than, let's say, half of what has happened since Endgame. But I would be very interested to see how people that have had very different life experiences from me interact with the idea and the character. Because I've got lots of superheroes who are cishet white guys, right? That's easy. I can throw a stone and I'll hit 3.
Yeah, the way they set up this trailer in terms of excitement level, it feels to me a little more like how the anticipation for Winter Soldier than most other of the recent Marvel films. They're getting back to how the world interacts and perceives superheroes on a smaller scale than the really big stories we've been dealing with. And yeah, in terms of Anthony Mackie being Captain America, that I can see how we might be able to get back to those kind of stories again, and try to ask those questions and bring up the important details of all that.
And in the trailer, there's a fascinating moment which may or may not be representative of the tone of the entire movie. But there's a moment where Thunderbolt Ross says to Mackie, "You're not Steve Rogers." Mm-hmm. And Anthony Mackie responds, "No, I'm not." And the very next moment is his character in the Captain America suit with the shield flying with the Falcon wings, which just drives home the "this is Captain America, this is not Steve Rogers" dichotomy. The movies are fascinating in one way in that they have to tell a boiled down version of the 80 years of Marvel continuity. They can't cover all of that, and if they don't switch out actors, their characters will eventually age out of that role. We've been doing this for well over a decade now. And if they want to keep rolling with the same continuity forever, and I think at some point, inevitably, they will have to do a reboot of one form or another. But if they want to keep rolling with the same continuity in the movies, they have to update the characters. So I think there's a real drive to look at a more human side of some of these characters, because these characters are actually being played by humans, albeit with a lot of stunt work and a lot of prop work and a lot of CGI. But at the end, there are actually people wearing those costumes, so the costumes have to be things that look like people can wear them.
Yeah. And that's those are all good points. I kind of wanted to see a couple more Avengers just hanging out. I wouldn't mind seeing Bucky there, or the Hulk, or Bruce Banner, just chatting with Mackie here or there. Who do we think Giancarlo Esposito was playing?
If all the internet rumors are true, he is supposed to be playing GW Bridge, who is a SHIELD agent normally. But considering S.H.I.E.L.D. was disbanded in the MCU continuity long ago, who knows what organization he's working with? Probably the Damage Control, considering they seem to have replaced S.H.I.E.L.D. in terms of policing supers.
I mean, certainly are they actually calling it SWORD that they were talking about with the space station that Nick Cage is now running? There is another organization that clearly inherited a lot of S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel and purpose, although it looks to be more extraterrestrial.
Yeah, they didn't go into enough. They didn't go into enough detail of what that group actually did.
Yeah.
when they talked about them. So,
but they have now lost their space station, so there could easily be. The other interesting thing is that there's in the shot a explosion on a regular old aircraft carrier, which makes me wonder if, for example, they are going to discuss. We built a bunch of helicarriers. They blew up, and they're too expensive to make anymore. So the United States has to make do with just regular old nuclear aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
Which, fair enough. We have a nuclear aircraft carrier-based economy at the moment. We don't have gold-backed money. We've got nuclear aircraft carrier-backed money here in the real world. So it's an important element of the U.S. being able to present power places. At the same time, in Marvel, I suspect having the Avengers on American soil was seen as a important projection of American power. So it'll be really interesting to see, right, is the Red Hulk an effort by the United States to replace an empty Avengers? Are they going to mention that they don't have enough Avengers to go avenging at the moment? Or at least not enough of them doing stuff? Are they going to touch on or lead into what feels like an inevitable Young Avengers movie where they have, again, introduced those characters over time and we've seen them individually and they've had training in some cases and seen them with powers in others?
Yeah.
I hope that we are moving out now of what I have seen as an awkward post-Endgame time period, which was inevitably going to be awkward because Endgame was one of the biggest, most popular, most complicated backstory movies in history. And perhaps have some of those elements that they've been kind of fumbling around with, at least in some cases, and have them move forward. I'll also be fascinated to see if anyone ever mentions that there's a giant head and a hand sticking out of the ocean, and we got to do something about that at some point.
I know, right?
I think we're just pretending that didn't happen, along with all those characters who were introduced in Eternals. Lewis Porter.
We're only pretending it didn't happen until someone comes up with a great plot point and mentions it again. And that may be a decade down the line. But one of the things that they clearly keep doing is going, all right, let's go back over the scripts. Let's see what was actually in the movies. Let's see what elements we can pick up. So I think we'll hear something about it someday, even if it's, it turns out it was not particularly stable and it crumbled into dust a few weeks later. Something will come of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I thought the Young Avengers was happening years ago. We had Hawkeye, we had what's her name and Doctor Strange, we had the two kids from WandaVision, and if that's going to happen, they're kind of taking their time getting there. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. Lewis, I want to acknowledge. He says, I think he'll be Nick Fury 2.0 of the MCU. That could be. If he is GW Bridge, who I understand it stands for George Washington Bridge, I'm going to make lots of jokes about how he is Gwen Stacy's arch enemy. If we get that joke, we can be friends.
Oh Lord.
So we're cautiously optimistic. It doesn't look bad. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is not out. Maybe it's getting a standing 10 count, and we're hoping this can bring things back. Is that a fair summary?
Well, I'm always hopeful for comic book movies. Yeah, being a comic book fan, I'm liking the look of this movie more than I have for the last several Marvel films that I've seen.
I don't want to even suggest that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is at the beginning of a 10 count, right? What it is, from my point of view, is it won a championship round with Endgame, right? That was hugely popular financially. Even critics admitted it was interesting and good. Fans loved it. So that was a championship game. The MCU has since then, in my opinion, been out of training and gotten a little flabby and is not in fighting trim, but it's still currently the champion. its movies are still making more than $100-200 million on a regular basis. It remains a more than $1 billion a year franchise.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to do all of that with movie income. I mean, it's got the streaming, and we don't know exactly what part of it it's adding to that, but they certainly keep doing series. Agatha All Along is coming around, which, you know, they appear to have played a 1.5 year long joke about what the name of that series was going to be, where they kept changing it and then finally settled on the series of it being Agatha All Along, suggesting that was always what the name of the series was going to be. So it's evolved, it's changed, it's mutated. It hasn't had a hit as big as Endgame, but pretty much no one has had a hit as big as Endgame. And some of the individual, I thought the Shang-Chi movie was quite good. The most recent Spider-Man movie, I enjoyed quite a lot.
Oh yeah, I love the Spider-Man movie.
They may not have hit the highest of high peaks, but it's still producing more good movies than mediocre movies, and very few genuinely bad movies. So, you know, it is, I think, premature. It has always been premature to say that the MCU was going to die. I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy was first coming out, and there were pundits all over the place saying, well, the Guardians of the Galaxy are total unknowns. So this is the moment when the Marvel Cinematic Universe will collapse and fail. Or they announced the first TV series. They're like, well, you can't do Marvel on TV. So this is the moment when the entire MCU will fail. And it just hasn't. I'm
not saying it's been knocked out. I'm just saying it's taken some lumps. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure. But I think, like any good prize fighter, going back to my analogy, it can take the lumps. And I don't think we've seen it standing in the corner getting beaten without being able to fight back.
Fair enough. Lava Being in the comments is asking, what's going on with the Ironheart TV show? I feel like that filmed pre-COVID. According to Wikipedia, that filmed in 22. And
it's supposed to premiere in 2025.
Yeah. They're doing, the rumor is they're doing reshoots right now. They have confirmed they're doing some editing and post-production right now. The reshoots thing is just a rumor. But yeah, 2025 is what I'm seeing for a premiere date. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, it's kind of been in production for a bit.
Marvel has always, when they started announcing what was happening for the next decade, they have always sometimes been wrong. And at least for a while, it looked like the way they made both movies and television shows was shoot all the footage we can think of, and then take it into the editing room and see if we can cut together a movie from that. I suspect Ironheart is one of the moments when they realized that's not working for the television shows, that you really need a firmer idea what you're doing, and that they are cutting it more tightly together to make sense. I also think they have probably had a shift in their expectation for what the big elements of the MCU is going to be. You know, the Eternals is kind of lucky in that part of the whole concept of the Eternals was that no one knows we exist. So if we never see any of them again, it just turns out they're really good at not looking like they exist, except for the giant celestial hand and head, which I continue to believe we'll hear about eventually. So it may well be that there were elements that they thought they were going to play with that would tie into a series, but they're just not. For that matter, they may have intended to tie the character more tightly to Black Panther things before we lost our Black Panther actor, who was an amazing actor and brought a gravitas to that role that I'm not sure anyone else could have. And that, I suspect, strongly impacted their plans for what they were going to do with that going forward. We saw in the second Black Panther movie that there was an intent there to bring Ironheart into that, and in that movie it felt a little awkward, and I suspect that's because they thought they would have that series out, but they may have intended for there to be elements there that they can no longer play with going forward, and that just leaves them scrambling to recut this and have it continue to make sense.
Well, they were building up towards a big Kang event, and then some things happened. So yeah.
And I was kind of excited for that Kang event because when they had Endgame and they solved the issue by using time travel, I was like, this is the perfect way to set up Kang showing up, because he's the time traveling villain. They've messed with time. Now comes in Kang as the next big villain. And to a degree, I was right. Unfortunately, they had to scrap that entire thing.
Well, they may or may not have scrapped it entirely. I suspect, again, folks, spoilers, that some of that may get addressed in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
Because we know from the trailers that the Time Variance Authority shows up in that. So that, if ever there was a character that you can change who the actor is and it makes perfect sense within continuity, it's Kang, right? So I think it is perfectly possible that they may have hit a giant pause reset button on it, and that, again, may adjust a lot of their plans, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to give up on it.
Okay, so working Marvel theory now, Giancarlo Esposito is secretly Kang.
That beats my theory of Ryan Reynolds. So
Ryan Reynolds would make a great Kang, honestly.
Good Kang, or any of the Kang variants, be it Immortus or whatever.
Right. Iron Man. I mean, and that's the other thing, right? You could go with, okay, we're going to do Ironheart, and then we're going to do Armor Wars, and then we're going to do something with the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, which may be from an alternate timeline entirely. And then we have Iron Lad show up, and we have Iron Lad kind of slot into a young Iron Man role, and then we reintroduce Kang. And when we do, we can mention, oh yeah, you've run into variants of him before, this time and this time and this time. So they've got if ever there was someone that you can skip this off ramp and take another one later, Kang is in that category. I would love for Kang to end up as a Doctor Doom villain, if you do a Doctor Doom movie where he is our anti-hero or dark protagonist.
Oh, yeah.
That definitely beats Squirrel Girl.
I love Squirrel Girl. You take that back. Squirrel Girl showed
I love Squirrel Girl so much. I really love her.
Can we agree it's a different tone if it's Squirrel Girls in the Doom movie?
Yes.
I think Squirrel Girl is a very similar tone, for example, to Deadpool, just with less cussing and evisceration.
Yeah. Indeed. You know, the number of geeks I talk to at the Krav Maga studio or at the gym or at the coffee shop who are like, dude, Deadpool is saving the MCU in 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, let's hope so.
I think Deadpool will be mocking the MCU in 2 weeks.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the very least, we get that Sabretooth Wolverine fight we didn't get back in the X-Men movies.
Well, but then again, we may not get it, right? They have led up to it so much that it would not startle me in the least if Indiana Jones shoots Sabretooth and that's the end of the matter.
Yeah,
that could happen. Definitely. So, you know, have you guys ever been in a superhero RPG campaign that came to this kind of, you had a long-running campaign that did like an endgame ending?
Yes.
I'd say, really? Okay.
Yes.
All right. You guys have been in longer campaigns than I have. So.
The original Meta World game, which was run by my past friend Mark Curley, which a lot of Superpowered Legends is based on, ran for 15 years. It was an extensive campaign with numerous teams and lots of different player characters over multiple sub campaigns. So it was massive. Yeah. And we did major things like that a couple of times.
I played in a long running Champions game run by my friend Carl called the International League of Heroes, which actually he had a whole world, and that was just one of the superhero groups in it, but they were, UN run heroes where the idea was that the national hero of every member was a member of the ILH. And one of them was a Superman type character, but he had landed in Russia, so his name was Stalin because, Man of Steel. And this is before they did that concept in the comics. And eventually we had a huge crossover reality-shattering event. And to save everything, the player who was playing Stalin sacrificed his character and he died. And then a couple years later, they did the death of Superman. And everyone in our group agreed the death of Stalin was a much better storyline than the death of Superman. So, yeah. If you run a game long enough, especially a superhero game, these things can crop up.
Yeah. I feel like you have silly opinion, but a lot you have a big event for a comic company. You've got so many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, I'm sure it's worse when you're making a movie, but you've got 5 or 6 guys in a comic book big event saying, no, do it this way, no, do it that way. And when you get this written by committee, where if it's an RPG, it's much smaller. It might just be that one player and that one GM figuring out how they want, the character to have to work. So it's a lot easier to get it. Yeah.
I also think your point also ties to what I was saying about the MCU having to have a tighter continuity. One of the problems with comics is that they've been doing multiple titles for like close to a century now.
Yeah.
So if you say, what is Batman's backstory? And you're like, well, there were 400 issues of Detective Comics, plus there are 20 million other comics he's been in and tie-ins, and he's in the Justice League. So you can end up with this tangled mess. They just have to create so much content over the course of years. Whereas I'm lucky if I can get together to play a game, once every 2 weeks. So even a 10-year campaign won't have as many things happen as over Batman's life or Superman's or Spider-Man's. And you can, again, have that tighter, okay, we can do the good parts version of these plots that we like.
I wouldn't mind if they did the good parts version of Secret War or the Skrull and the Secret Invasion, I mean. I'm
not going to sit here and defend every Marvel Cinematic movie.
This was a trailer reaction show. We got enough subjects. Sorry.
Well, that's the genius of the MCU, right? You can't talk, if you're a nerd, if you're a comic book nerd, you can't talk about one movie without spiraling off into everything they've ever done.
Yeah, they have done a brilliant job with the MCU of making this massive connected universe. With, that I am so happy that we have this. Who would have expected in 2007 when you first watched that Iron Man trailer that we were going to have this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before the MCU came along, we had a few Batman trilogies and
a couple of X-Men
and Shaquille O'Neal's Steel movie, right? That those were the baseline.
And Blade.
And there was ample reason to think that superhero movies would never translate well, or superhero stories would never translate well to movies. Turns out they do. It just the trick is to make good movies.
Yeah,
it's just that simple. Just make a movie that doesn't suck, and
no, totally.
Yeah, it's a thing.
I know from sitting in corporate headquarters talking about IPs that sometimes the top 5 concerns for managing an IP aren't to make it not suck. When I was working on the Star Wars role-playing game, a C-suite person who no longer works at Wizards of the Coast, so no one get mad at them now, they haven't been there for 20 years, but he literally looked at me and said, how good your game is doesn't matter. We will make the same amount of money whether you do a great job or a terrible job. So quality is only important that it has to be good enough that Lucasfilm doesn't cancel our license. Beyond that, what you do is irrelevant. I disagree with that strongly. But he was genuinely convinced that any concern we had about quality was irrelevant.
I won't say every C-level executive I've talked to seemed like a robot, but I wouldn't not say that. So I think to get that level in a corporate bureaucracy, especially a big one, you got to have a certain kind of personality. Sir, IPs and Hasbro. I heard on Twitter this week from somebody who said they worked on the damn cartoon.
Yep.
That there is a full season of a Micronauts cartoon.
52 30-minute episodes. In the can. Ready to air.
And they Batgirled it. They did not.
Well, they haven't Batgirled it yet because they haven't taken it as a write-up, right? They can't release Batgirl without having to go back and pay back what they got as a tax break.
Yeah.
Hasbro hasn't claimed a tax break yet on the Micronauts series. It looked like what happened is that they were going forward with a bunch of their IPs, and they had Micronauts at that point. And then they decided, as this series was wrapping up, we are going to do our own cinematic universe that's going to have Transformers and G.I. Joe and ROM and Micronauts and Mask and Visionaries. And this cartoon is too different from what we're going to do with that series, and we don't want to confuse people, so we can't release it yet. And yet has been years now, and it's pretty clear that Hasbro is not going to be able to launch that massive a cinematic universe anytime soon. Now, there is the fact that G.I. Joe was revealed at the end of the last Transformers movie, and I believe they are, in fact, doing a Transformers G.I. Joe movie.
Yeah, it's the next film that's going to be after Transformers 1.
Yeah. I do not foresee them managing to bring Visionaries and Micronauts into that. Mask is a gimme. If you've got G.I. Joe and you've got Transformers, all you have to do is say, oh, and we've combined those two groups, and that's Mask, and they're over here. But Visionaries, no. That they're not going to be able to pull that in. ROM, maybe. Once you have... with the... was it IDW that had ROM in the same universe as the
Yes.
Transformers?
Yes.
They did some great comics with that.
Yeah.
I want my Micronauts and my ROM to both be the Marvel Cinematic Universe version, and the more Hasbro wants to do their own cinematic universe, the less likely it is. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have that yet. The less likely it is that we will get the really awesome cinematic universe ones where the Micronauts and ROM had real impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Rogue running into ROM is one of the things that helped her go from being a villain to being a hero, which is a crucial part of her story arc.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going off on a tangent again. But yeah, there is a 26 hours of Micronauts finished, right? I mean, according to one of the people that was running the show, it's not just that they have the scripts. It's animated, it's dubbed, it's edited, there are credits. They could press a button and put it up on Disney Plus tomorrow.
Oh, my.
We can only hope release the Micronauts.
I hope it gets released, because as an artist, I would hate to see a baby I worked on like that just tucked away forever. Yeah. So yeah. I really hope, for the sake of everyone who worked on it and my own freaking fandom, that we get to see it someday.
And I know that pain, right? The very last Star Wars RPG book I worked on was never released.
Ouch.
It was finished. It was never released. And that license expired, and that game is no longer in print, and a different, Lucasfilm was bought by Disney. That stuff is dead. I can't do anything with it. I thankfully, it was a pay upon completion contract rather than pay upon publication. So I was paid for it, but all that work will never be seen by any eyes other than the 5 or 6 of us that were responsible for making the manuscript.
I was working on an Annihilation themed event for the Marvel Heroic role-playing game. And then, Disney wasn't happy. The money wasn't enough. So it's just brilliant little game. It's going to be a cool event book. It was just gone. So.
Yeah.
But, oh well, it's poetry. What can you do? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Without going into details, I worked on a set of rules for a Starship combat game for a company that was going to be released as a box set. And then the price of paper changed, and they could not do a box set anymore. It just wasn't an option. And after a long, hard look at it, the decision was made that we can pull some other stuff we were going to put in this box set out and make a book out of it, but we can't release a box set anymore. So the miniatures war game that you worked on isn't happening.
Yeah, that's a bummer. It happens sometimes. But art that's being made and released, if we can call it art, is Captain America: A Brave New World.
Yes. With
Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, as Captain America. Harrison Ford as whoever he played on Air Force One. And
he is playing that. He is playing Thaddeus Ross.
I hope the Red Hulk says, "Get off my plane" at some point. That would be awesome.
that would be pretty great. And I want Louise from Ant-Man to show up at some point and just summarize the last 5 years of the MCU. When someone's like, "So where were you? What have you guys been up to?" But that's not going to happen.
You say it's not going to happen. I still hold out hope that before the next Avengers movie, that they will, on Disney Plus, have a short where someone asks him, "What's going on with the Avengers anyway?" And then he covers everything that has occurred from Endgame to that moment.
Yeah.
And Disney Plus, if by some miracle someone there is watching or hears about this, it's a great idea. Do it.
Or just make Lewis the Watcher. Good idea. Just take that. All right. I'm being summoned upstairs, guys. Good talking to you. Thanks
It's
everyone
great to
for
see you.
checking out the BAMF podcast, and we will see you next time.